Hi all, my name is Becky. I'm an abstract intuitive painter and I'm going to invite you to come paint with me in a sketchbook ritual. So for my sketchbook rituals, this is my version of a morning meditation, a sketchbook practice, and a tarot practice all rolled into one. I am pulling one tarot card today and then I'm going to create this piece. So sometimes I'll pull a tarot card or 1 or 3 or 10, and other times I'll pull animal spirit cards or oracle cards. I am a collector of decks and it's just whatever I'm feeling in that moment. And sometimes I pull the cards before I start painting, other times I do it after. So there's no method to my madness, rhyme to my reason. That's kind of my whole painting practice is I'm just here to make it as easy and efficient as possible and not be too bogged down by all the details. So you can see I sped up that first base layer and then I went in with a Stabilo All pencil. I use Stabilo All pencils. They're water soluble pencils in every painting I do, whether it's on paper, in my sketchbook, or on canvas. I love them. And then I'm going in, and these sketchbook pieces are not thought out in advance, much like all of my art practice. I am leading by intuition. I'm experimenting, I'm playing. Again, I am going into this just to warm up, to invite whatever I want on the canvas. I very rarely go in with a palette in mind beforehand. It's all about experimentation and it's all about play. I do like the way that yellow tone, the ochre, plays with the purple. I know those colors work really well together and I'm experimenting. And I do mark making and oftentimes it ends up being like floral imagery that I bring into my pieces, especially of late. It's spring. I'm looking at flowers. I'm thinking about flowers a lot. So they're making their way into my painting. And I'm not using a reference image. This is purely from impulse and memory. And I'm bringing in the spirit of play and letting one mark lead to another, switching up paint brushes, holding the paintbrush really loosely. I call this like a sketchy paintbrush motion. I'm bringing in some white there, playing around with different colors. So I thought the card that I picked for this tarot pull was perfect, the High Priestess, because the High Priestess embodies the embodiment of intuition, which is perfect for my practice here. So it felt really fitting that this was the one card that I pulled for this. I'm bringing in a lot more of that white covering up. Again, this isn't thought out. This is one move to the next. So some other things to know about the High Priestess. It's, again, I said intuition. Also, innovation represents independent thinking, future-oriented vision. Oftentimes it's associated with the moon. And astrologically, it's oftentimes associated with Aquarius, which is also fitting, given that I'm an Aquarius. So air sign, really into unconventional ideas, which agreed, same. I'm very much an air sign, very much an Aquarius. I am now going on a speeding up that I'm using that little dryer to dry those layers and then come on, and I muted a lot of those background layers and now I'm bringing some of that those marks and the imagery back. I like a lot of layers. Sometimes this could go on and on and on, especially in a sketchbook practice where I'm pushing it as far as it can go if I have the time, because why not? It's a sketchbook. Like, I think that's the beauty of creating in a sketchbook and creating on paper is you just, in your gut, you feel less precious about it, and it invites that kind of experimentation. I also love, you can see that I really like to use all angles of the brush. So you saw I was using the side. Now I'm etching and scratching right into it. I'm trying to get, again, as many marks, as much texture, as much interest as I can onto the canvas. So another, someone told me once regarding the High Priestess is that, and I think this applies to intuitive painting as well, your insight doesn't need constant external proof. It doesn't need validation from others. It's just whatever feels good for you. So I think of that like this piece and like my sketchbook practice, that this is for me. I am not going to sell this piece. I'm not worried about what it's going to look like hanging on a wall. This is pure experimentation, and it will oftentimes lead to bigger pieces and what I create in the long run. But for right now, I'm not worried about the end product. In general, I'm not worried about the end product when I'm painting. I try not to get stuck in that space. I teach a lot of workshops and retreats, and I find that a lot of students, especially if they haven't painted in a long time, come in with an end goal in mind and a painting and what they want it to look like. And it's a lot of constant reminders for me, and teaching them kind of my thought process and the way I work is that's antithetical of how I work. I'm really trying to stay present and in the moment. So, and I call it a dance. I call it a dance in painting, because I'm bringing in different marks, bringing in different colors, seeing how they work together. If it works, great. I'll keep going and let that influence the next step. If it doesn't work, it's still going to influence the next step, because I'll take a U-turn. And people are often surprised at how willing I am to make changes and to switch things up. And that's just from painting a lot and really trying to practice the gift of staying unattached and letting the art kind of guide me, and listening to my inner voice and what I want to do next. And again, the more you paint, the easier that gets. I'm actually not, and I can tell you, because I know that this piece, once it's finished, I'm not in love with this piece. In fact, when I finished it, I was going to share it onto my social media, and I almost didn't, because I was like, it's kind of ugly. And I did share it, and I'm sharing it here because, again, that's the beauty of this process, and that's the beauty of a sketchbook, is paint ugly art. And oftentimes that's when my favorite pieces end up coming through, is when I'm willing to paint it as ugly as possible. And what I mean by ugly is obviously subjective, but just messy. And again, ugly can mean it's just full of life. So it's up to interpretation, as art always is. You can see I oftentimes bring in tools for mark making from my kitchen, and I just brought in a plastic fork that had come in a takeout container, and I knew I didn't need it, and right away I was like, this is going in my art studio. I'm gonna play with it. I went to look for one the other day and I didn't have one, so I needed to get one in my studio, because it's just what I knew needed to happen. I needed to have a plastic fork to create some texture in this piece. As you can see, I added some reds. I had kept going with the pinks, and now I'm bringing in a green, and I think that created lots of contrast. And again, that's a color that I knew would work well with that red. And I'm continuing with these loose lines and loose work, but I'm bringing in kind of the idea of foliage. I think when I was going in there, I was like, just the hint of it's abstract. It doesn't have to look exactly like greenery and florals, but I liked the idea of it in there because it looks like I have some buds and some floral marks. Again, I'm not trying to create hyper realistic flowers here. These are the idea of flowers, and I like making them when you see in a bouquet where the flowers are going all different directions and creates more interest. I am just knowing that I have composition wise leaving some space in kind of the center of that piece and working around the edges. It's a dance of bringing in lights and darks, so I'm bringing in some lighter, that green kind of toned down with some titanium white and bringing that around those marks just to help them stand out. I'm working fast. If you've ever been in a class of mine or you've heard me talk about painting and my approach to painting before, a couple things about how I work is I tend to work dark to light and I work fast to slow. So, it helps me if I come in these early layers to work really fast because then I'm not overthinking it. And I'm not stepping back too much at this point in the painting until later on when I'm starting to see if it's done or what else I could add. But right now, I'm just adding more interest and seeing what's working. I'm calming that middle area down even more at this point. And there's a lot going on with those florals, so I know in my head I'm thinking, let's add a little more of these muted tones. The muted tones are going to help those bright colors pop. So you can see I went and added that quinacridone purple on top of it, and it allows it to show up a lot more on top of the white now. I have these script brushes and I've been going in and I use soft body or fluid white paint, and I even oftentimes will dip it in a little bit of white to make it even runnier, and then I use these long script brushes and bring in that thin marks throughout, and I like using that because it's just a thinner brush and it adds a different texture to it. Coming back in with that Stabilo All. I had lost most of those Stabilo All pencil marks. So again, I'm looking at creating different textures, different line work, making it some variance throughout the piece. I brought in that bright pink. Oftentimes I will bring in just pops of even a brighter color on top. So white and pops of really bright colors at the end, which is, I'm dancing between those two things right now, white and then the bright colors. I wanted an even lighter white tone. I lost some of that white earlier on in the piece. So at this point, I'm creating some final little marks with a thinner brush, but I lost some of I wanted a darker tone in there. So I went and I'm using Payne's Gray, which is a favorite of mine, to bring in that darker contrast. But I don't want it to overpower it, and so I'm bringing, the same way I said what I was doing with the fluid titanium white earlier, I'm doing that here. I'm creating kind of a loose, thin brush strokes. So I've been so I had a show go up last week, and then I've been working on some of the redesigning of my website and some of the business aspects of being an artist. So I haven't gotten as much time to paint lately, and I was a little rusty. I'd been painting nonstop for the last 2 months, really, and mostly on larger canvases, getting ready for this show that just went up at our library. And I needed a bunch of big pieces, and I had been itching to get back into the studio. And so that's what this piece is, was just my first piece back, getting in my hands in some paint. And again, I was feeling kind of rusty, and that's probably why I needed this as a warm-up, and I wasn't entirely happy with it, because I sometimes getting back in after I haven't been in the studio for a while, I just need more time to kind of get in the flow, get in my flow state. So this one I'm starting to slow down a little. I'm taking a look at it. I'm seeing what else I can add to it or take away. Making some last marks. You can see that brush, that thin brush right there. And I don't use this often on bigger pieces, but I use it a lot in my sketchbook and on paper. Drying it one last time. And then here I took, oftentimes at the very end is when I will go in with oil pastels. It's easier to add them on top of acrylic than under acrylic because they're oil pastels. I've read some people say, or I've heard some people say that you should never add acrylic on top of oil pastels. I don't always do it, but I will sometimes, and it's not the end of the world. Removing the tape. Nothing like a tape reveal. Here you go. Finished piece.